Hi, my name is Samantha Botwinick, and I did my ethnographic research on California's methane impact from livestock on climate change. I am an environmental studies major, and I'm passionate about bringing awareness to the issues that contribute to the climate crisis. The reason I'm doing this research is because I care deeply about finding solutions to global warming, bringing attention to animal agriculture, and fighting for environmental justice, which all starts with focusing on the state of California, which is where I was born and grew up. Along with this, finding innovative, cleaner practices is something that I care about because I want to work towards a sustainable future with a healthy environment for everyone. In this case, I want to focus on how powerful methane emissions are in California and how they affect the environment. The harm that can take place if we don't implement mitigation and adaptation strategies can be detrimental. California leads in methane emissions in the US because of factors such as dairy production, agricultural methods, and the amount of dairy and meat farms. The meat and dairy industry as a whole has a significant impact on climate change because of not only methane emissions, but also land and water use, manure management, deforestation, and other factors. Overall, nature and the planet, which is our home, is my central point for this project. California is responsible for being the state with the most methane emissions from livestock. This can bring up the question, what is methane? Methane is a powerful natural greenhouse gas, which is highly flammable, colorless, and odorless. It is 80 times more harmful than carbon dioxide at trapping heat in the atmosphere. It has a significant contribution to climate change that is escalated by human activities. Our environment is no longer a natural environment, but rather a human man-made environment. Everything within our environment has been altered to meet human needs. California is the fifth largest economy in the world, and as of 2024, there are approximately 1.7 milk cows in California. Plus, there are over 1,100 dairy farms within the state. California is putting measures in place to reach the goal of reducing greenhouse gas emissions by 40% by 2030 and 80% by 2050. Although the majority of California's methane emissions are biogenic, they are still a result of human animal agriculture activity. According to the UC Davis Clear Center, the dairy livestock sector accounts for about 45% of all methane emitted within the state. This comes from two sources, which are manure management and enteric emissions. A large amount of methane emissions are emitted through enteric fermentation within the rumen, which is a stomach compartment. Then methanogens break apart plant material, then expels methane gas. Methane gas is emitted mostly from burping, but also from their farts and manure. This is mainly from cows, but is also emitted from other livestock such as sheep and goats. Factory farming is the largest sector responsible for these emissions. Areas such as Central Valley in California, as Central Valley and Los Angeles are targeted with high levels of methane emissions. People who live in the Los Angeles or Central Valley areas are deeply affected by methane emissions from farms. According to satellite data from scientists from NASA and the University of Michigan, they found a methane hotspot over Central Valley, California. This persisted from 2003 to 2009, and this was the second largest hotspot in the United States. Some California residents may have differing views on environmental issues because of how our health is affected and our level of exposure to them. For example, Central Valley residents encounter a lot of exposure, whereas other areas in the state, some people may not see it as an issue because it doesn't affect them directly. Growing up, I didn't live far from a cow farm. I had no idea the toll it could have on my health. The systemic concern shows how blind people can be to universal problems such as climate change simply because they live in a certain area or of a certain race or how much money they make. This revolves around the concept of environmental justice. Residents who live near these farms, which emit methane, are subject to lower quality air. Minority and low income communities are the ones most affected by this and face physical and mental risks. To add on, this is caused due to issues such as redlining and these communities not having the political power to oppose such strict measures. These residents encounter unfair environmental problems, which is why the Environmental Protection Agency needs to take immediate action to regulate methane emissions. The EPA can do this by using their authority over animal feeding operations and concentrated animal feeding operations to control methane emissions and call these operations out as polluters under the Clean Air Act. Plausible adoptions of mitigation strategies could achieve 4% of the globe's agricultural mitigation potential. Additionally, the ideology of humanitarianism is relevant because of the marginalized communities that suffer from environmental injustice. This is due to the government and large corporations strategically place factory farms in lower income minority communities. The right to a clean environment is a fundamental basic human right and people of color or lower incomes should not have to suffer from methane emitting farms being placed near their homes. Methane is a huge threat to public health, and due to this, California's pollution is worsening, and we are experiencing hotter weather, more droughts, more wildfires from climate change. Methane can also cause issues such as asthma, depression, anxiety, fatigue, lung disease, and an increased risk of stroke. There are several solutions that can be considered when reducing California's methane emissions. These methods include methane trapping, small changes in feed crops, and changing and adding new regulations to factory farms. In California, methane trapping has been used recently in 238 methane trapping projects, and around 129 of them are active while the rest are still developing. Methane trapping is a process that uses digesters to capture methane that comes from manure and convert it into renewable energy. California has distributed over $350 million to build digesters on dairy farms. Besides methane trapping, it is evident that changes in feed crops have a significant impact on methane emissions emitted. Ermias Kabab, a professor at UC Davis, brings an interesting solution to attention on PBS News. While we watch this short clip, he explains how small, cost-effective solutions are possible in reducing methane emissions from livestock and making a drastic change.
Ermias Kabrab is a professor at UC Davis, and he's been studying how dietary supplements affect the amount of methane a cow emits, almost all of which comes out of its front end.
About 89% of the methane is actually been formed in the gut of the animal. And almost all of that is then eructated out or belched out from the animal. So the nostrils and the mouth. We don't care about the back end.
Kabrab's research has shown that it doesn't take a lot to dramatically alter the amount of methane burped out. In a study that was published last year, his lab found that adding just 3 ounces of seaweed each day reduced methane emissions by 82%. Ermias Kabrab is a professor.
As we can see, climate solutions don't always have to be expansive, expensive, or difficult to interlope with existing practices. Nevertheless, several climate activists have criticized the methane trapping strategy on farms. These criticisms are based on the strategy of not being cost effective, it's difficult, and uses a lot of energy. If more of these meat and dairy farmers comply with these strategies, we can make immense improvements, but also we must consider factory farming as an agricultural practice. Factory farmers are expecting a change in their daily routines. They must add extra cleaner practices into their work to meet environmental standards. These newer solutions go against traditional livestock farming practices. This can result in cultural resistance. According to a commentary from CalMatters.org in 2024, a fourth-generation farmer, Darvin Bentledge, shares how the farming business gets harder each year. He states how his family farming operations have been passed down for generations and criticizes California's low-carbon fuel standard program. Ultimately, he says the program should consider how it will harm rural communities because it's basically supporting industrial dairy operations and adding pressure on family farm operations. Therefore, California regulators should require industrial and family farmers to add digesters in their farms. Bentledge's main problem with this was that California regulates policies like this one. Industrial farms are encouraged to expand at the same time, which pollutes more rural communities and completely goes against the main point of reducing methane emissions with this strategy. He finds it hypocritical how he already uses sustainable methods in his small family farm, but is required to add digesters and doesn't get to participate in the market or gain the same benefits from industrial farms. Unlike industrial farms, family farms don't have huge manure lagoons, so they don't have nearly as much pollution to even use digesters. A possible drawback in this project is the reliability of qualitative data. Solving methane emissions relies on a lot of quantitative data to pinpoint the science behind how this natural gas is produced. Although qualitative data isn't backed up by science, it shows how we got to this point, how human behavior formed a society where this has become a critical environmental issue. Additionally, the general public having restricted access to so many factory farming facilities prevents us from performing inclusive observations. Importantly, climate change and methane emissions are a crisis that affects everyone. But insights such as Bentledge's commentary shows us how the ones being directly affected by this have to say in response. Throughout completing this research project, I discovered how methane's impact culturally and environmentally affects global studies. It enhances global studies research by highlighting innovation strategies, environmental justice, environmental science, policymaking, and cultural effects. In general, California's methane emissions need to be reduced in order to accomplish climate goals. Methane emissions are a massive goal. Global studies matter, and sustainable solutions must be addressed in order to achieve global environmental success. Overall, this study allows us to propose questions such as, what does this mean for the well-being of minority and low-income communities in California? Or how would the eradication of factory farms to reduce methane emissions in California affect the economy? These questions help us picture a future we want to live in that is healthy and safe from the possible catastrophic results of climate change.